a boy so quiet his parents thought something was wrong with him, grew up to write the book half the internet calls evil. Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power has sold over 4 million copies. It's been banned in prisons. Business executives keep it in desk drawers they don't let colleagues open. And the part that doesn't add up, Greene himself was never the powerful one in any room he walked into. So how does a man who spent his 20s and 30s drifting through 50 different jobs, construction, hotel work, tour guiding, end up writing the most controversial strategy book of the last 3 decades? There's a specific turning point. But if I told you now, it wouldn't land. You need the context first. Picture Hollywood, early 1990s. Greene is barely into his 30s. He's landed a job working with a film producer, and for the first time, he's seeing raw power up close. Not political power, not military power, the quiet, daily kind, where an agent smiles at the director he's already decided to fire. Greene described Hollywood as the ultimate power environment. And the reason is simple. Nobody there admits what they actually want. Every meeting is a performance. Every compliment is a calculation. Scripts get praised in rooms where they've already been killed. Deals happen at dinners that look like friendships. Careers end over phone calls disguised as check-ins. And the people who don't see the game, they get chewed up, slowly, without ever understanding why. But here's what made Greene different from everyone else watching this play out. Most people in Hollywood either learned to play the game or left. Greene did something stranger. He started taking notes. Obsessive, detailed notes, like a biologist cataloging a new species. And to understand why he responded that way instead of any other way, you need to rewind about 30 years. There was a boy growing up in Los Angeles, quiet in a way that made the adults around him uncomfortable. His parents were not cruel. They were simply distant. Not the type to sit on the floor and play. Not the type to ask what he was feeling. And so the boy did something children do when affection isn't available. He became an observer. He sat at family dinners and studied the undercurrents. Who was tense? Who was pretending? Who was about to leave the room? He walked through schoolyards reading body language like other kids read comic books. Not because he wanted to, because it was a protective device. If you could see the tension building, you could step aside before it broke. That boy was Robert Greene. And that habit, watching people the way a naturalist watches animals, never switched off. The 50 jobs across Europe weren't aimless wandering. They were field work. Construction crews in Paris, hotels in Barcelona. Every job was another sample set of how humans jockey for position, form alliances, and betray each other when the stakes get high enough. Now, here's where Greene's thinking takes a darker turn, and where most summaries of his work miss the point entirely. Greene doesn't talk about power the way motivational speakers do. He talks about helplessness. He calls it the worst feeling a human being can experience. Not pain, not grief, helplessness. The specific sensation that forces are acting on your life and you have zero ability to push back. And he doesn't say this to be provocative. He says it because he felt it through decades of watching smarter, kinder people lose to those who simply understood the rules of the game they were already playing. Think about the last time you felt that. Not frustrated. Frustrated means you're still fighting. Not sad. Sadness has its own dignity. Helpless. That stomach-dropping recognition that nothing you do will change the outcome. Greene argues that most people live inside a low-grade version of that feeling and have gotten so used to it they've stopped noticing. They think they're making free choices, but they're reacting to bosses who set invisible rules, to social hierarchies they never agreed to algorithms that feed them outrage because outrage keeps them scrolling. And this is something Green started warning about long before the current conversation around social media. He pointed out that television, and later platforms, train people to be passive, to consume opinions instead of forming them, to watch other people's lives instead of directing their own. Green saw this decades ago. He called it a form of cultural helplessness. People convinced they're informed because they're consuming, when consumption itself is the trap. The result is a population that feels busy but has very little actual agency. And that gap between busyness and agency, that's where manipulation lives. Which brings us to something most people get fundamentally wrong about power. And I need you to sit with this one for a second because it's uncomfortable. Gandhi, the global symbol of nonviolence, the man in the simple cloth, was one of the most ruthless strategists of the 20th century. The Salt March of 1930 was not spontaneous. Gandhi chose salt specifically because the British salt tax hit every Indian household, rich and poor alike. He mapped a 240-mile route designed to maximize press coverage at every stop. Every step was calculated. Martin Luther King studied Gandhi's playbook and applied identical strategic logic to the American Civil Rights Movement. Nonviolence wasn't their surrender. It was their weapon. And then there's Law 15, crush your enemy totally. The line critics hold up when they want to prove Green is teaching sociopathy. But watch how that law actually plays out in the real world. When Google enters a new market, they don't try to coexist. They acquire or they outbuild until the competitor suffocates. Amazon's strategy, stated openly in shareholder letters, is to capture so much market share that competition becomes irrelevant. Green didn't invent that behavior. He gave it a name. Most of the time, organizations already operate by this law. They just don't say it out loud. So let's close the loop. Why did the quiet, sensitive kid who couldn't handle his parents' emotional distance grow up to write the book people call evil? Because he spent 40 years watching a single pattern repeat. Good people, smart people, getting blindsided by dynamics they refused to see. Not because they were stupid, because they had been taught that noticing power is the same as wanting it. Green's book was never a manual for predators. It was a field guide for the people who kept getting caught in traps they didn't know existed. Green has said it bluntly about his critics. Those are people who haven't read it. And when you actually go law by law, more than half have nothing even remotely dark about them. Always say less than necessary. Plan all the way to the end. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. That's not manipulation. That's competence. His later work, The Laws of Human Nature, goes deeper. Green draws on Melanie Klein's object relations theory, the idea that envy isn't a character flaw. It's a wired-in psychological response to perceived inadequacy. We don't envy people who have what we don't want. We envy people who have what we secretly believe we deserve. And maybe that's what makes the 48 Laws so uncomfortable. Not that it teaches dark things, but that it names the things people already do and forces them to see it in themselves. The discomfort was never about the book. It was about the mirror. So the next time someone tells you the 48 Laws of Power is a dangerous book, ask them one question. Which law specifically made them uncomfortable? Because Green's point was always this: if a law triggers that gut reaction, that flash of, I could never do that, it's probably the law you need to understand most. Not practice, understand. If that distinction landed for you, subscribe. We break down the psychology behind the books and ideas that most channels won't go near.